The Xbox Series X and S launched in November of 2020, and since then has seen a growing library of games available on the console, both from indies and AAA studios, many of which are available on Xbox Game Pass. If you're looking for the next great game to delve into, or if you've just grabbed an Xbox Series console and want some good picks to get started with, these are the best games you can play on the Xbox Series X and S. If you're looking for the next great game to delve into, or if you've just grabbed an Xbox Series console and want some good picks to get started with, these are the best games you can play on the Xbox Series X and S. It's hard to fully explain what sort of game Control is. After all, there is nothing else out there quite like it. It falls under the action-adventure category, but you wouldn't exactly compare it to Tomb Raider or Assassin's Creed. The game takes place entirely within a strange place called the Old House, which serves as the headquarters for the Federal Bureau of Control, a government agency investigating paranormal activity. You play as one of their members, Jesse, and throughout the game you must attempt to put a halt to the invasion of a species known as the Hiss. You do so with a very fancy gun and a slew of special abilities that you acquire during the game. These powers are so impressive that you feel like a superhero or Jedi Knight while playing. There has been a litany of Dragon Ball video games. Not many of them have been RPGs like Kakarot though. The title offers a brilliant retelling of the Dragon Ball Z anime, featuring all of the biggest moments shown through beautiful cutscenes. The actual in-game combat is a lot of fun too. Fights are fast-paced and feel smooth just like battles from the anime. The open world is also pretty interesting as it features plenty of different locations and contains some excellent side stories. Resident Evil 2 is one of the greatest remakes of all time. Capcom completely rebuilt the 1998 Resident Evil game from the ground up in an attempt to bring it up to modern standards. The company certainly succeeded, as it's an excellent survival horror game. The movement and combat feel very slick, and the visuals are incredible. Even the story has been altered a bit. It still has the same general premise, but things play out a bit differently, plus the writing is better. Altogether, it's the best version of Resident Evil 2, which is saying something because the original is iconic. There are a few great games in the Dead Rising series, but for many years most fans still considered the original the best. And thankfully, the quality of that original has mostly been maintained in the deluxe remaster, which is really a remake. It contains all of the chaotic fun of the original, such as the strange, over-the-top weapons and some equally over-the-top characters. It also boasts a story that is more compelling than it's often given credit for. Naturally, the visuals are a lot more impressive than in the original, and there have been some quality of life improvements too. As such, reviewer George Foster says it's unarguably the best way to experience Dead Rising. Seeing the blue pants wearing Bandicoot on Xbox consoles is still unusual, as he was once one of the biggest PlayStation mascots. However, it's a great thing for Xbox Series XS players, as it means they get to experience the fantastic Crash Bandicoot 4 title. Like the other games in the series, it's a platformer where the camera is sometimes behind you, other times to the side of you, and on rare occasions it's in front of you. Add to this the addition of rails to grind on, walls to run on, ropes to swing on, masks that give you special abilities, and the different playable characters means there is a lot of variety to the title. Games don't get much creepier than Little Nightmares 2. It's a puzzle platformer mixed with a horror game. You play as a little creature who ends up in a very strange place called Pale City. Your only ally is an equally small creature in a yellow raincoat. Pretty much everything else you meet is giant and trying to get you. You don't have the fighting capabilities to battle them, so you must use your brain and sometimes stealth skills to get past them. The art style is amazing and very unusual. Some of the monsters, for instance, are so unsettling that they may scar you for life. That is all part of the fun though. Subnautica is an open-world survival game set primarily underwater. However, it isn't just any old ocean that you are swimming around. It's an ocean planet that your character has crash-landed on. The game is all about exploring the underwater wonders and picking up resources. You also have to watch out for the local flora and fauna, as it can be deadly. The gameplay is very open as you get the freedom to explore as you see fit. As most games don't give you an underwater open world, the exploration feels unique. The Metaphor ReFantazio was developed by Atlas, who also made the Persona games, so it does share some similarities to those titles in regard to presentation and tone. Yet, it is its own game, and Meg Pelliccio even calls it the new peak for Atlas in her review. The story is set in a medieval fantasy realm called the United Kingdom of Uchronia. The place has just lost its king, so it holds a tournament to crown a new ruler. You participate in the tournament, but you also have other things going on, such as attempting to lift the curse that has been put on the prince of this realm. In the process of doing all of this, you participate in plenty of battles. For the most part, the combat uses a turn-based system that rewards strategic thinking and taking advantage of enemy weaknesses. There is also a bit of hack and slash combat in the game, which you can partake in to get an advantage on some enemies or wipe out low-level grunts. Both combat systems work well. There have been plenty of Dragon Ball games over the years, yet Sparking Zero is better than almost all of them. It's a highly polished 3D arena fighter that attempts to make you feel like you're playing an episode of the anime. As such, battles are incredibly fast-paced, and all the special moves and attacks are wild and visually stunning. The game is designed with fans of the series in mind. As a result, it isn't very balanced since the strength of each combatant is based on how strong they are in the series. So, all of the characters are on different levels. This is another way in which it feels like the anime. Along with spectacular fights, the game offers varied modes and eye-catching visuals. Reviewer George Foster says, its smart evolution of Budokai Tenkaichi's combat, stacked and detailed roster, and near-endless amount of modes and features make it one of the best Dragon Ball games of all time. The world had to wait a long time for another entry in the popular RPG series known as Dragon Age. It finally came though, in the form of Dragon Age the Veilguard. The game follows your created protagonist as you recruit companions and take on evil. While the title isn't as tactical as longtime DA fans would perhaps want, it's still a stellar action RPG with excellent character writing, strong world building through narrative quests, and the most exciting combat the series has ever seen. One criticism that has often been thrown at the Call of Duty series is how similar each entry is. Well, the Black Ops 6 campaign is certainly different from the usual COD story mode. There are multiple stealth operations, a horror-like level, and a mission that features a small open world. Call of Duty isn't known for any of those things. Not only are these missions different from those in other entries, but they're also distinct from one another, making the campaign a varied one. The game also contains a fantastic zombie mode and some solid PvP play. In their review, Charles Berger says it's the first truly unique COD experience we've received in half a decade. The protagonist in Dragon's Dogma 2 is known as the Arisen. You choose what they look like, but their ultimate goal will always be to take down a specific dragon as they're fated to do. You aren't on the adventure alone though, as you have NPC pawns to command that will help you on your way. This includes assisting you in battle, which is needed since Dragon's Dogma 2 isn't the easiest game in the world. Combat can be brutal, but it's also very strategic and fun. In fact, reviewer Ryan Bamsey calls the combat system masterful. That isn't the only thing the game is going for it though. The world is interesting, the visuals are impressive, and the story is solid. So it's an overall brilliant game. The Sonic series has undergone many changes over the years, and the quality of its games hasn't always remained consistent. Yet there have been some good ones, including Sonic X Shadow Generations, which is among the best in recent memory. It's a remaster of Sonic Generations, but also includes a new campaign featuring Shadow the Hedgehog. Both the Sonic and Shadow adventures include a mix of 2D and 3D gameplay that incorporates the quick platforming that the series is known for. The level design is amazing, so the combination of different dimensions works really well. Xbox fans had to wait a long time for Death Stranding as it came out on the PS4 in 2019, but didn't come to the Xbox Series XS until 2024. However, it was worth the wait, as it's a fantastic game. As it comes from the mind of Hideo Kojima, it's a very odd title that doesn't fit into any traditional genre. You play as a courier with the face and voice of Norman Reedus, who attempts to deliver supplies to isolated colonies. The premise is simple enough, but the narrative gets much deeper and more complex as time goes on. Yet, as unusual as it can sometimes be, it never stops being compelling. The Indiana Jones franchise is mostly a movie one, but there have been several games about the famous fictional adventurer, and the Great Circle ranks among the best. In their review, Eric Switzer calls the game authentically indie, which is an apt description. This is because the developers haven't just placed Indiana Jones in a generic action-adventure game, they have made a game that really feels like an Indiana Jones adventure. The story fits the series, as it features Indy going on an adventure to find an artifact before the Nazis. Along the way, you punch a bunch of those Nazis, which is also fitting for the series. Along with beating people up, you solve puzzles, do a bit of exploration, and make use of stealth. None of it feels like it goes against what the series is all about. In fact, it's one of the better Indiana Jones projects in some time. There are many Souls-like games out there these days, but few outside of From Software's catalogue are as outstanding as Lies of P. The core combat isn't dissimilar to what you expect to see in a Souls-like. As such, you face challenging enemies where you must attack, dodge, and parry your way to victory. The incredible atmosphere and macabre setting set the game apart from many others in the genre. Plus, the story that is very loosely based on Carlo Collodi's The Adventures of Pinocchio is a really compelling one. Without a doubt, Forza Horizon 5 is the game that needs to be installed on every Xbox Series console out there. While Forza Horizon 4's UK setting was a fresh and interesting location to race, the beautiful landscapes of Mexico make this entry a must-play. And whether you're a huge fan of racing and cars, or if you don't really know anything about them and just want to zoom around what reviewer Sam Watanuki calls a beautifully chaotic yet incredibly fine-tuned open world, this game is an easy choice. With so much to explore, challenges to complete, DLC to play around with, and community-made content, this game will always have a place on Xbox Series X and S. The one that many may not have heard of, or at least seen it pop up on Game Pass and then never tried it, Hi-Fi Rush is an incredibly stylish and action-packed rhythm game that is worth playing. If you want to jump into something simple that'll keep you entertained for a while, you can't go wrong here, and as mentioned, it launched on Game Pass too, so it's completely accessible if you are on the fence. It stands out well amongst the many games available and easily takes its place as one of the best games to play on Xbox Series XS. One of the most memorable, perhaps not. One of the most fun. Absolutely. Reviewer Jade King says Alan Wake 2 easily stands alongside the giants of the survival horror genre and often surpasses them. This could be considered surprising, as Remedy doesn't typically go full-on survival horror for its titles. But Alan Wake 2 certainly fits into the genre, as it has plenty of spooky and unnerving moments. Yet the game also has humor, great storytelling, and plenty of wackiness. The story follows two people. The titular character is naturally one of them, and he's in a creepy and surreal reality called the Dark Place. Also along for the ride is the detective, Saga Anderson, who is investigating a murder in the strange town of Bright Falls. As both characters, you must face off against plenty of strange monsters, which is where Alan Wake 2's unique combat system comes into play. You're encouraged to use your torch to burn away the darkness that protects the enemies before you finish them off with more traditional weaponry. Resident Evil 4 was one of the best games on either the GameCube or PS2 back in 2005. Now, the remake is among the greatest Xbox Series XS titles. While the story, characters, and general formula are the same, pretty much everything else has been rebuilt from the ground up. Therefore, this action-heavy survival horror title feels fresh. The visuals are impressive, the shooting is fun, and the whole experience is scarier than the original. Altogether, you have an incredible Resident Evil game that made reviewer Eric Switzer say, "I just don't think games get much better than this." From Software made some of the best games of the previous console generation, so of course the company also put its stamp on the Xbox Series XS era with Elden Ring. In her review, Jade King claims it combines Dark Souls' natural sense of discovery with the foreboding atmosphere of Bloodborne. This is seen in its intriguing open world that's called the Lands Between. The place is filled with different places to go and things to see, and while exploring you're likely to run into a whole host of enemies, from standard foes to serious bosses. As this is a From Software game, these battles are very difficult. Much of the fun comes from overcoming these adversaries using strategy and perseverance. The Star Wars Jedi Survivor is a sequel to 2019's Fallen Order, and like its predecessor, it's a classic Souls-like game. This means you use dodges and parries to protect yourself from being quickly wiped out by your adversaries. The game isn't as punishing as a Dark Souls title, however, due in part to all the fancy Force powers you have at your disposal. Whether you are using the Force or your lightsaber skills, the combat is engaging. The reason why you have both those options is because you're playing as a Jedi. He is named Cal Kestis, and alongside his allies, he is searching for a place safe from the Galactic Empire. In their review, Stacey Henley calls it an intimate, well-crafted story. Street Fighter has been one of the most famous fighting game series since the arcade days. Street Fighter 6 is among the best in the said series. It offers smooth and satisfying fighting mechanics and is a treat for the eyes with its beautiful visuals. The game also provides plenty of content, including a deep RPG-like mode set in the Street Fighter world. That may sound like an odd inclusion in a fighting game, but it works quite well. And it's optional, as you can ignore it entirely and still experience a full-fledged fighting game. In fact, in their review, George Foster says, as a fighting game, Street Fighter 6 is pretty much flawless. Sometimes you may hear about a game getting a remake and think that it doesn't need one, as the original holds up very well. For some people, that was the case for the original Dead Space until this exceptional remake came out. At its core, it's still Dead Space, but it looks, sounds, and plays much better. Plus, the story of Isaac Clarke exploring a spooky abandoned ship filled with monsters is all the more engaging now that the character actually speaks. As a result, Jade King, in her review, calls it the definitive version of Isaac Clarke's first chapter. The base Devil May Cry 5 game predates the Xbox Series XS, but it was later released on newer systems as a special edition. This version doesn't present a huge change from the original, except you get an additional playable character in Virgil and upgraded visuals. Thankfully though, it's just as exciting and fun to play as it was in 2019. The game is incredibly action-packed as you fight all sorts of creatures in fast-paced battles, where you're encouraged to kill your opponents in ruthless and flashy ways. It's all very satisfying, and the combat has plenty of variety as you play as different characters who each feel distant to control. The story is equally wild and entertaining, making this one of the best action games in recent memory. At the end of their review of Tekken 8, George Foster says, "Tekken is back, and it's just as strong as it's ever been." That's a bold claim, considering how critically acclaimed the series has been throughout its entire history. Yet there is a lot to love about this Tekken game. The developers have made a few changes to the fighting mechanics to make it as fast-paced and fluid as ever. Plus, the story mode tells a truly compelling tale. And the cherry on top is that the game contains several features that make it easier for newcomers to get acclimatized to the series. All of the main Gears games are great in their own right, so it's no surprise that Gears 5 happens to be an excellent title too. It doesn't completely change the series, as it includes the familiar third-person shooting mechanics. Yet, as always, the cover system and gunplay feel very responsive and satisfying. Also, the story is compelling in this one. For once, it isn't about a member of the Phoenix clan. It's more about Kate Diaz and her family, which is a nice change of pace, especially as it turns into a pretty fascinating tale. The Witcher 3 was initially released long before the Xbox Series XS was revealed to the world. Yet, CD Projekt Red was nice enough to release a complete edition for the new generation of consoles. This version comes with updated visuals and 2 amazing expansions, Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine. They're great, but the main selling point is the outstanding base game adventure that sees the famous Witcher, Geralt of Rivia, go on a mission to find his adoptive daughter, Ciri. It's an epic tale that's complemented well by a bunch of excellent side quests featuring their own exciting stories. Throughout it all, you use a mix of Witcher spells and sword fighting techniques to battle the many guards and monsters you encounter in this fantasy RPG world. Grand Theft Auto 5 predates the Xbox One, never mind the Xbox Series XS. However, it has been re-released on the latest Microsoft system and remains an exceptional open-world action-adventure title. The interesting main story revolves around 3 criminals whose lives intertwine as they pull jobs together and try to get the government off their backs. Whether you're on a mission or in the open world, you can freely switch between the 3 characters that make up one of gaming's best trios. Whoever you're controlling, you'll shoot, drive, and generally cause havoc in the parody of Los Angeles called Los Santos. In Stray, you play as an adorable cat. This isn't some sort of special feline with outstanding powers. They're a regular cat like the ones you can have as pets, except they're controlled by you. Unfortunately for the cat, they don't have a warm home. Instead, they find themselves trapped in a cyberpunk city filled with robotic creatures. The goal is to get out of there. This makes for a unique adventure game as you wander the city using your natural athleticism to climb and jump around. On top of that, you interact with things and solve puzzles to progress the narrative forward. It's also possible to just mess around by doing classic cat things, such as scratching the carpet and knocking stuff onto the floor for no reason. Doom Eternal is a first-person shooter that doesn't let itself get bogged down too much in storytelling or cutscenes. This game is all about the action. You play as a person many call Doom Guy, and you need to destroy countless demons to save the world. So, the premise is straightforward. The combat is very fast-paced as you're encouraged to be in perpetual motion while you deal with the large groups of varied creatures that you're meant to kill. Therefore, there is a significant focus on running around and shooting in this game. It's smooth and satisfying fun. Being trapped anywhere is pretty bad, but hell might be the absolute worst place to be stuck. That is the situation facing the son of Hades, Zagreus, in the game named after his father. As Zagreus, you have to get out of the underworld. You try to do so by making your way through a bunch of randomly generated rooms filled with colourful enemies. You aren't expected to reach your destination on the first attempt. With each run, you get a little stronger and better. Throughout it all, the combat remains fast-paced and fun. Also, you get to meet a lot of interesting characters along the way. Sea of Stars is very different from a modern RPG. It doesn't look like the Final Fantasy VII Remake or Mass Effect. This is a game clearly inspired by role-playing games from the 90s, particularly Chrono Trigger. As such, it has a retro art style and presentation. Plus, the turn-based combat feels old school too. Sea of Stars proves that all these elements can still work today, as this is a really fun RPG. In fact, reviewer Andrew King says it's one of the best turn-based RPGs I've played in some time. Andrew particularly liked the combat. Yet, the story and characters aren't bad either. The basic premise revolves around two heroes who intend to save the world. However, things get more complex as their adventure gets rolling.